Hey guys, welcome to Sunday School. Here are our announcements. First, we have fellowship tonight. All 9th through 12th graders are welcome. It's a welcome to Mo's night, so it's at my house at 7:15ish, and we'd love to see you there. Hear about your Thanksgiving break. Secondly, you can still sign up for Ridgehaven. You can find the link to Ridgehaven in our Instagram bio, but you can also it's trinitypca.org/Ridgehaven. We're running out of spots. It's getting close, so we're almost full. So you want to go ahead and get that spot if you haven't gotten it already. We're excited about that. We're excited about Ridgehaven. Also, even though it's still 2020, it's time to start thinking about 2021 and about RYM. This year we're going to RYM Colorado. That's in June, and we'll have the dates up soon and a sign up available soon. Also, for middle school, that's current 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, we'll be going to Middle School, Florida, RYM Middle School. That's also in June. So we'll have the dates for that coming up. I know that it's a ways off, but it's time to start thinking about that. You want to schedule your summer around that. It's going to be an awesome time. We didn't get to have RYM last year, so they're probably going to really blow it out this year and make it awesome. So you're going to want to be there. If you've never been to RYM Colorado before, it is a very unique experience. We went in 2019. We're trying to go every other year, and we went in 2019, and it was a really fun trip, an awesome trip. So we'd love to have you for that. Again, fellowship tonight. It's a welcome to Mo's night. Hopefully we'll see you there. And I think that's it for announcements. Thanks to all those who helped with Operation Christmas Child. Here is the intro to Sunday School. Hello and welcome to Sunday School for November 29th, 2020, our last Sunday School of November. This is Old Testament 2.2. We are continuing our series of the Old Testament, a survey of the Old Testament. We're in Exodus today, and we're beginning to look at the 10 Commandments. So that's what we'll be covering today. Happy to have you with us. You can join us in person for Sunday School. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving holidays. We'd love to see you at church for Sunday School. That happens at 9:45 to 10:30 each Sunday. If you can't be with us though, hopefully you can avail yourself of this and you're following along with us as we study God's Word. So thanks for joining us. Let's jump into it. Okay, so today we don't have a very long scripture reading. It is Exodus chapter 20. We're going to begin in verse 1. We're going to read verses 1 through 6. This is the first 2 commandments. And this is Exodus chapter 21 to 6. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and the 4th generations of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. That's Exodus chapter 20. Verses 1 to 6, the first 2 commandments. Last week, we looked at the Passover and God delivering Israel out of the hands of Pharaoh and Egypt. Israel has crossed the Red Sea. They are on their way through the wilderness to the mountain that God had promised to Moses, that his people would worship him on the mountain where the burning bush took place. And here they are. And they are going to receive... Moses is going to receive these 10 words. Some people call it the Decalogue. The Deca meaning 10, logos, word. These 10 words. And we're going to take them hopefully 2 at a time each week so that we can get through them a little bit more quickly. And so today we're looking at the first and the second commandment. And there are a few things that I'd like to point out to you. Let's start with the first commandment. The first commandment reads in verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me. Now, what's so interesting about this commandment is that it is impossible to break any of the other commandments, the next 9 commandments that we'll receive from God, that Moses receives from God. It's impossible to break any of them without first breaking this one. This is the very definition of sin, is to have another God besides the true and living God. And this is the commandment that we break all the time. Now you might think to yourself, well, no, I've always gone to church. It's always been a Christian church. I grew up going to VBS, and I don't think I've ever worshipped any other God. I've never been a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu, or I've never worshipped any other God. And you couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, this is why this commandment is the first one, for a number of reasons. Not to dive into why God ordered them the way they are, but the reason that this commandment is the first one is because we do this all the time. We worship other gods. Now, our gods are not like the gods in the time when these were given. Maybe we don't erect statues to the gods that we serve other than the true and living God, but we still do this. We've talked about idolatry a bunch, either at fellowship or here at Sunday school or at small groups. But idolatry was the biggest problem of the Israelites at the time, having a different God other than the true and living God, and it's still our biggest problem today. So this commandment is extremely relevant to us. Now, the gods that we worship, we don't sometimes we don't create statues or things that represent them, but we still worship them all the same. In fact, many times what we worship are immaterial things. We worship things like approval. That is our God, that other people approve of us and like us and say that we're a good person. And that's really important to us, and that's our God. And we live our life making sure that we hold on to that approval. Some of us worship security, right? Safety, making the right choice, the wise choice. We always want to make the right choice and the wise choice. We have little mercy or grace for those who don't, because we worship a God where if you make the right choices, you'll be safe and secure. That's a self-righteous God of security. There's influence. Many of us worship influence. We want to be able to matter. What we say and what we do matters, and people pay attention to it and listen to it. And that's the God that we serve. And so these are not things that are easily represented by a single object, right? And so sometimes we can look at this commandment and be like, well, I'll check that one off. I haven't done it. But in fact, this is the commandment that I break and that you break most frequently, is that we worship other things. If you think about it, you don't steal something unless you are worshiping a different God other than the true and living God. You don't steal an answer on a test by cheating or by letting someone else do your homework for you or by actually taking something that doesn't belong to you. You only do that if you think that the true and living God can't provide for you, and you believe that you have to survive on your own ingenuity. Or maybe what you believe is not necessarily that there is no God, but that God is not good, and so therefore He cannot be trusted, and so you've got to take what you can get. You've got to get yours while the getting is good. And yet again, no matter how you do it, and we can do this with any commandment. We can do this with lying, with bearing false witness. We can do this with coveting, adultery, murder. Any of them that you list, you can't commit that sin until you've decided that God is not in charge and that you have to take charge, that you are in charge of your life, that you are, you kind of like, if it is to be, it is up to me gospel. And you have to believe in it. You would never say, well, I believe in the God of my own ingenuity or my own self-righteousness. And even though your lips would not confess that, or my lips would not confess it, our actions tell a different story. Our actions tell what we really worship. And so that's why this commandment is such an important commandment, because it reflects the fact that we want to be on the throne, that we want to remove God from the throne, and we want to be on the throne. And we can't do any of the other sins unless we first have that sinful desire. In fact, if you think about it, that was how Satan appealed to Eve, right? That you will be like God. You will be knowing good and evil. And that was her first sin, is to doubt God's goodness and to want to be in His place. In other words, the first sin that was ever committed was having another God besides the true and living God. So, with each commandment, we want to do this before we close. We want to do three things. One, we want to talk about how it affects our vertical relationship, so our relationship with God, and then our horizontal relationships, which would be our relationships with one another. And then lastly, how does this point us to Christ? First and foremost, this obviously has a damaging effect on our relationship with God when we say, we don't want you. We're like the younger brother, the prodigal son, and we say, we wish you weren't around. we just want what you can give us, and that's it. And we want to be on your throne, or we want to be in your place. And so obviously this has when we worship other gods besides the true and living God, it affects our relationship with Him, right? And so there's that part. That's kind of easy to see, if you will, but also it affects our horizontal relationships, because when we worship other gods, then we do one of two things with people. First, with others, we either worship them, like if we worship approval, we kind of make them the gods that we worship, right? You know, the boyfriend or the girlfriend or the group of friends or the friend group or whatever. We've got to have that approval. We've got to have that status that comes along with that relationship. We've got to be in the right group. That is putting our friends in their approval, or our peers, or whoever it is, a coach, a teacher. We're taking that person and we're elevating them to a status where they don't belong, right? And so we're moving that relationship into the place, into God's place. But it also affects our relationships in another way. Not only could we elevate our relationships and worship them, but we also, if we worship other things, maybe it's security or self-righteousness or whatever it is that others then become just a tool, either a hurdle that's in our way of getting to our God, or a tool for us to get more of what we want. But either way, they're not our friends now, right? They're either an object of our worship, or they're an object that we're using to get more of what we want. So violating this commandment not only damages our relationship with God, but it actually damages our relationship with other people. And we're going to see that in each commandment, is that our relationship with others affects our relationship to God, and our relationship with God affects our relationship with others. So there is a relationship there. You know, if you have a bad relationship with God, a damaged relationship with God, you're going to have a damaged relationship with others. And if you have a damaged relationship with others, it's going to affect the way that you relate to God. And all these things are connected. Lastly, for this commandment, I want you to see that this commandment points us to Christ in this way, is that Jesus Christ lived his entire life in obedience to and recognition of God the Father. As he says, I don't do anything that I don't see the Father doing. In other words, I'm completely subservient to him. My mission is just what he wants me to do. I'm doing my Father's work. God is telling Jesus what to do, and Jesus is doing exactly what God wants him to do. He is living his entire life in recognition and obedience to God the Father. And so a picture of what this would look like perfectly, and we're going to see this with every commandment, but a picture of what this would look like perfectly is Jesus Christ himself. He does nothing of his own accord. He lives everything that he did was to bring glory to the Father. And so that's how Jesus fulfills this commandment on our behalf, right? We will never be able to do that. Our record is already broken, even when we're very young, right? We are already selfish. We're already worshiping other things. We're already putting our desires ahead of God's desires. But the glory of the gospel is that we receive that perfect account, that perfect keeping of the first commandment that Jesus Christ did on our behalf. That's what we call justification by faith alone, and that's the core of our hope as Christians. So this is how the first commandment points us to Christ. Let's look at the second commandment. Okay, so let's look at the second commandment. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Now, yet again, just like the first commandment, you might be tempted to think that you don't really violate this commandment very often. I've been in your houses. I have seen you around, and you don't carry carved images that you bow down and worship to. You might think, I don't have any idols as we think of them. And, maybe there are no pictures of Jesus in your house or whatever. And so, and oftentimes when we see this commandment, one, we think our initial reaction is well, I probably haven't done that. I don't even know how to whittle wood, so I could, or carve stone, so I wouldn't know how to make an image like that anyway. And another thing that we think is, not only do we think that we haven't done it, in that regard, but we think it's kind of like a sin that's in the past, right? The second thing that we think is that this seems like a silly thing, right? Like, why would God not let us have, coloring books with pictures of Jesus doing things? I mean, that seems wrong, right? I mean, why has God got to be such a stickler? why is this such a big deal? Why can't we make images that represent His love, His mercy, His wrath, His justice, all these different things? And another thing about this commandment that we initially think too is like this is the commandment that the commandment didn't even make it down the mountain before this one was broken, right? Because later on in Exodus, we read about the golden calf. And many people might make the mistake that the golden calf that Israelite was violating the first commandment, that they were violating worshiping another god. But no, they were worshiping God. They had just created the golden calf as a representation of who He was. So this is a violation of the second commandment. So sometimes we kind of ignore this commandment. We think, if you walk around our church, you're not going to see, a lot of pictures, a lot of images. And that's for a reason. We don't have stained glass windows with pictures of Jesus or Isaiah, or we don't do that for this very reason, because God specifically forbids it in His Word. So there's a reason why that's the case. And other churches, other denominations have a different take on that, and you might see those there. But here at Trinity, you won't see those things. And the reason that you don't see them is because of the second commandment. Now, why is it such a big deal to do that? Like, let's answer that objection. Like, it seems like God is being a little bit of high maintenance here. We can't even have a picture. Well, we've talked about this before, but any time that you depict God in any way, and that could be artistically, like drawing, sculpting, but also like verbally, how you describe Him, you are not giving a full picture of God. We want to let God reveal Himself to us, right? We want to let Him reveal Himself to us. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to depict God in a way that misrepresents who He is. And this is something that we do all the time, right? We do this all the time. We emphasize certain aspects of God, and we de-emphasize other aspects. And any image that we would make, whether it's a word picture or it's actual picture, is going to emphasize certain parts of who He is and is going to de-emphasize other parts. And that in and of itself is what we would call heresy, or technically a lie about God, right? Because we're misrepresenting who God is. The way in which we do this all the time, where people do this, I remember distinctly in high school that I knew a girl who would say, would start out sentences like this. She would say, she's probably a better Christian than me, so whatever. But she would say, theologically here, she was in error. She would say, I like to think that God is like this. Now, anytime that you start the sentence, I like to think that God is like this, whatever is going to come next, whatever that this is, it's a complete waste of everyone's time. Okay? It is completely irrelevant. It is a complete... What you're doing is saying, this is the way that I want God to be. In other words, we are created in God's image. We don't create God in our own image, which is what the second commandment is about. It's such a silly thing to say. I like to think that I can have a pet tiger, or that I can have a pet polar bear, and it'll be all warm and cuddly, and we'll drink Cokes together. A polar bear is an apex predator. And when it gets big enough, it's going to eat me. And it doesn't matter what I'd like to think about it. There's a reality of what a polar bear is. And it's absolutely ludicrous. And even though we do this all the time, and I do it too, right? I'm guilty of this, is that we'll say, I like to think it's God like this, or the God that I worship would never do this or would never do that. And what that is it's projecting what we want to be true about God onto Him. We are trying to create a new God, a different God, a God that is... that appeases our desires and our wants, and instead of worshiping the God as He truly is, which is why this commandment is so important, is because what this commandment says is, I'm going to reveal to you who I am. God is telling us, I'm going to reveal to you who I am, okay? And I'm going to reveal who I am to you in a specific way. And I'm doing that so that you know how I actually am, instead of having to guess what I might be like, or hope, or think that in some way you get to determine what I am like. So this commandment is very important, and we break it all the time. We either emphasize God's wrath and His justice and His displeasure, and we serve a mean, judging God. And all that is true about God, by the way. He is, not necessarily the mean part, but He is wrathful and He is just, and all that is true. And we kind of ignore His love and His mercy and His tenderness, right? Or we go the other way and we emphasize God's love and His tenderness and His mercy, and we just kind of gloss over the parts where He talks about His anger burning or His wrath or His judgment. And we create kind of like a Santa Claus in the sky, right? As someone who just gives us presents every now and again and is a kindly old man. And again, that is a misrepresentation of who God is. That's why God had to list this commandment. Second, number 2 on the list, is because we are so prone to do this in our minds. Whether or not we're doing it with our hands, creating images that give a false representation of God, we're absolutely doing it in our minds and in our hearts. And that's why this is so important. Now, let's talk about those 3 things that we're going to talk about with every commandment. How does this commandment or the breaking thereof affect our relationship with God, our vertical relationship, and then how does it affect our horizontal relationships? First, our vertical relationship is that we're misrepresenting God when we break this commandment. We are not worshiping God as He has revealed Himself to be, but instead as we would like Him to be. We're creating Him in our own image. We're damaging our relationship with Him because we're lying about Him. Imagine lying about a friend, or talking about a friend behind their back. That's exactly what we do when we violate this commandment with God, is we misrepresent them. We misrepresent that friend, we misrepresent God. But also it damages our relationship with others, because when we preach the gospel of a God that's made in our image, right, one that we would like, we are misrepresenting God to His people. We are lying about Him to His people. So we have to be very careful about that. We would not want to do that. We would not want to misrepresent God or to mislead people about God in any way. And that's why He lists this commandment. So this commandment affects our relationship both vertically and horizontally. And then also, how does this commandment point us to Christ? Well, this is kind of an easy one, right? Because what is the exact image, the exact imprint of God's nature? What is the one picture of God that He has approved? Is Jesus Christ. In fact, in Hebrews 1, it says that He is the very imprint of God's nature. In other words, if we want to know what God is like, if we would like a picture of what God is like, He has given us a perfect picture. It cannot be improved upon. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the image of God. He is God. He is the second person of the Trinity. And so therefore, anything that we would say about Jesus, that we say is true about Jesus, is also true about God. So there's no improving on perfection. There's no reinventing the wheel. There's no reason to come up or to create a different God, because God has revealed Himself. That's what incarnation, He's in the flesh. He has come and He's dwelt among us. He's tabernacled. That's the word. In Exodus, they're going to build the tabernacle. We're probably going to cover that. And that means a dwelling place, right? Jesus Christ, in Jesus Christ, God Himself has dwelt among us. And so there's no way that we could ever improve upon or alter that in any way and it be productive, because that is the exact image of who God is. So if we want to know what God is like, read the Scriptures. Read Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Read the epistles and the New Testament and also the Old Testament, because all the Old Testament points to Christ as well, because that is what God is like. He has revealed Himself to us. Okay, well, that is our Sunday school lesson. I realize this might be a little bit of a shorter one this time, but we're going to do 5 lessons, I hope. My plan is to do 5 lessons, 2 commandments apiece. These are our commandments today, the first and the second commandment. What I want you to take away is this, first of all, that we can't break any commandment until we break the first commandment, which is to put ourselves in God's place, to have another God besides the true and living God. And secondly, it's important how we talk about God. It's important how we think about God. It's important how we depict God, because we don't want to misrepresent Him. We don't want to create God in our own image. We are creating His image, and we want to reflect that. So those are our 2 commandments today. Thanks for joining us. Again, you can join us in person at a church. Sunday school is 9:45 to 10:30. We'd love to have you there. If you can't be there, I hope that you're getting something out of this and that you enjoy this lesson. But we'd love to see you. We miss you. And we'd love to see you. Also, fellowship tonight. We have fellowship tonight, and it's Moe's. So that's exciting. So welcome to Moe's, and hopefully I'll see you tonight at fellowship and hear about all the great food that you ate for Thanksgiving. See you later.